Quick trivia. What's harder than going undefeated in the NFL? Going winless. Yep. 16 games, 0 wins, a historic goose egg. The Detroit Lions pulled it off in 2008, the NFL's first ever 0-16 season. And it wasn't just losing. It was a full-blown masterpiece of mismanagement, heartbreak, and football comedy. Get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into the ugliest collapse in NFL history. The craziest part? This team wasn't supposed to be a total disaster. In 2007, the Lions actually started 6-2. Fans thought, hey, maybe we're turning a corner. Unfortunately, that corner led straight into a brick wall. They finished 7-9, but at least they looked functional. Fast forward 1 year, and suddenly they couldn't buy a win if they had Jeff Bezos' wallet. How do you go from 7 wins to none? Think of it like cooking. In 2007, the Lions were that sketchy diner that gets your order wrong but at least brings you food. In 2008, they burned the kitchen down. And if you want to burn down an NFL kitchen, you need a chef who has no idea how to cook. Enter Matt Millen, the Lions GM. He was a Hall of Fame level linebacker as a player. As an executive, he was basically the NFL's version of Michael Scott running Dunder Mifflin. The man drafted wide receivers like they were Pokemon cards. Charles Rogers, Mike Williams, Roy Williams. None of them became stars in Detroit. Meanwhile, the offensive line and defense crumbled. By 2008, fans were so fed up that they started chanting "Fire Millen" at Red Wings games, Pistons games, even college football games that didn't involve the Lions. Finally, after 3 straight losses to open the season, ownership caved. He was gone. But by then, it was like trying to fix the Titanic by bailing water with a Dixie cup. And speaking of disasters, let's talk about the quarterbacks, because this season turned into the NFL's ugliest game of musical chairs. Quarterback is the most important position in football. Every good team has stability there. The 2008 Lions, they had a rotating cast of "please don't screw this up" that somehow got worse each time. It started with John Kitna, the veteran placeholder. Kitna wasn't elite, but he was tough, fiery, and occasionally competent. The guy once said he could throw for 10,000 yards in a season if given enough attempts. Reality check, he was gone after week 4 with a back injury, leaving Detroit to scramble. Enter Dan Orlovsky. If you only know him as an ESPN analyst now, you might forget he was once that guy who ran out of his own end zone. October 12th, against the Vikings, he drops back, rolls right, and without realizing it, steps completely out of the back of the end zone. Safety play over, NFL immortality for all the wrong reasons. That moment instantly became the blooper highlight of the season, the perfect metaphor for the Lions' entire year. No awareness, no direction, and out of bounds before you even know it. But wait, it gets better. Mid-season, the Lions got desperate and called up Dante Culpepper. Yes, that Dante Culpepper, the same guy who once threw moonballs to Randy Moss in Minnesota. By 2008, though, his knees were cooked, his arm wasn't the same, and he'd been sitting on the couch for almost a year. Detroit basically signed him off the NFL equivalent of Craigslist. Predictably, he struggled, tossing as many picks as touchdowns and looking like he needed a walker more than a playbook. Put it all together, and you had a quarterback room that was an absolute mess. 3 starters, 0 stability, and not a single guy who could elevate the offense. The trio combined for just 18 touchdown passes against 19 interceptions, finishing bottom 3 in passer rating. To put that in perspective, even Jamarcus Russell, the poster child for quarterback bust, put up better numbers that year. If defense wins championships, the 2008 Lions were giving them away like free samples at Costco. They allowed 517 points, over 32 per game, the worst in the league by a mile. That's the kind of number that makes every opposing quarterback look like a Hall of Famer. And here's the kicker. In 2007, they'd already been dead last in points allowed with 444. But instead of making changes, they kept the same defensive coordinator. That's like failing a test, retaking it without studying, and being shocked you failed again. The lowlight, Thanksgiving Day, when the Titans ran for 292 yards. Chris Johnson and Lendale White treated the defense like a warm-up jog. By mid-season, the Lions weren't just losing. They looked broken, blowing leads and missing tackles like it was part of the game plan. This wasn't just bad defense. It was one of the worst in NFL history. But here's the wild part. Despite being this bad, the Lions still almost won games. They had hope, and they ripped it away every time. The Lions came painfully close multiple times. Against the Vikings in Week 6, they led late, only to give up an 86-yard touchdown and lose 12-10 on a last-second field goal. Against the Bears, they were up 23-13 at halftime, then collapsed in the second half. Even in December, they lost 20-16 to the Vikings after giving up a game-winning field goal with 22 seconds left. Detroit wasn't just bad, they were cruel. Fans didn't even get the dignity of blowout losses every week. They got their hearts broken in slow motion. It was like being tricked into thinking, but when touchdowns fail, there's always one man who can still put points on the board, the kicker. If there was one silver lining, it was kicker Jason Hanson. The man was automatic, especially from deep. He went 8 for 8 on field goals of 50 yards or more. That's absurd consistency. In any other context, Hanson might have been celebrated as one of the league's best. On the 2008 Lions, though, it felt like putting shiny rims on a car with no engine. Hanson's heroics kept scores respectable, but no kicker can drag a dead team across the finish line. Unless field goals suddenly started counting for 15 points each, Detroit wasn't winning. And yet, despite the dumpster fire, one player rose above the ashes to become a superstar. You might have heard of him. He goes by Megatron. Amid all the wreckage, one player looked like he didn't belong on a winless team, Calvin Megatron Johnson. In just his second season, he racked up 78 catches, 1,331 yards, and 12 touchdowns. On a team that couldn't keep a quarterback upright for more than 5 minutes, that's ridiculous. Think about it. Johnson put up Pro Bowl numbers while catching passes from John Kitna, Dan Orlovsky, and a washed Dante Culpepper. That's like trying to make gourmet meals out of gas station microwaves and still ending up with 5-star reviews. Defenses knew he was the only threat. They doubled and tripled him, and he still roasted them. The sad part? His dominance didn't matter. You can't carry an NFL team alone, no matter how superhuman you are. Johnson was putting up highlight reels every Sunday, and the Lions still lost every single week. It was like watching Superman save a building, only to realize the whole city is still on fire. And if Megatron couldn't drag this team to even one win, you knew the coaching staff was in way over their heads. Rod Marinelli was in charge, and while he was respected as a defensive coach, his leadership produced 0 wins. He kept the same defensive coordinator from 2007, despite already having the league's worst defense. That's like keeping the chef who gave everyone food poisoning and asking him to cook again. By the end of the season, Marinelli was gone. His tenure ended with a record of 10-38. Man, to put that in perspective, even Hugh Jackson, who coached the 1-31 Browns, won more games in fewer years. And as much as the coaches failed, the real victims of 2008 might have been the fans. Detroit fans have suffered a lot, but 2008 took things to another level. Ford Field became a weekly house of horrors. Some fans showed up with paper bags over their heads. Others sold tickets for pennies just to avoid watching. One guy even wore a jersey that said 0-16 before the season ended. like he knew what was coming. And you know it's bad when opposing fans feel sorry for you. Packers fans, Bears fans, Vikings fans, they didn't even gloat. They just shook their heads like, man, that's rough. But in the end, the pain wasn't just about one season. It was about cementing your name in NFL history. And that's the legacy. The first 0-16 team in NFL history. The Browns later joined them in 2017, but Detroit will always have the honor of being first. The team didn't just lose, they set a benchmark for futility. And yet, in a strange way, that season forced the franchise to face reality. Change eventually came, and years later, the Lions under Dan Campbell looked like an actual threat. But no matter what happens, the ghost of 2008 will always haunt them. It's the year Detroit reached rock bottom and dug a basement. So, were the 2008 Detroit Lions the worst team ever? Absolutely. Historically, spiritually, painfully, you name it. But their collapse gave the NFL one of its most unforgettable storylines. If you like this deep dive, hit like, subscribe for more NFL history breakdowns, and tell me in the comments what's worse, going 0-16 or losing the Super Bowl in heartbreaking fashion. Until next time, just remember, no matter how bad your team is this year, they're not the 2008 Lions.